I want to walk you through the process of sharpening or resharpening the primary bevel on your plane blades. Now, why would you have to do this? Well, the most common reason is that during the process of sharpening the secondary and tertiary bevel, it gets too wide. You see that? Here's what's left of your original primary from here to here. Here's your secondary. So every time you resharpen, you're having to work all that material. Well, that's too much. So go back in and we regrind this and bring it almost to the tip. The other reason you may have to do it, actually there's two more reasons. If you were to break or drop it and you took a corner off or put a big nick in it. And the third reason is if in the process of freehand sharpening, you end up getting it skewed to the point where you no longer have enough lateral adjustment. So if you look at your plane, take the pressure off the lever cap just to make it a little bit easier, you only have that much lateral adjustment. Well, that doesn't translate into very many degrees from being square. So you have to pay attention to that. So you may have to do that, or that may be the third reason. So I'm going to take you over to the grinder. Now most people fear a grinder. They're afraid they're going to burn the steel. And true enough, that'll happen. But I found something here that I can't stop talking about because it's so dramatic. Normally, I would have told people, I said, go out and buy yourself an inexpensive grinder. All you need is something that's going to turn the wheel. What you do need is a really good tool rest. And I found this, it would be probably 12 years ago. I was teaching at a school in Ontario, and they had one of these mounted to the base or to the table. You'll notice it does not attach directly to the grinder. It fastens to the table. And I just liked it because it was such a nice, big, sturdy tool rest. Large, thick, and didn't move. Well, it also turns out to be it's a really great heat sink too. As thick as it is, it shares the heat with the blade and prevents it from overheating too quickly. I found out who manufactured it, and I might now stock it because I think it's the easiest way to convert an otherwise inexpensive grinder into a really effective grinder. So, inexpensive grinder, good tool rest. You always want to have, I always told people, get a really coarse wheel. Coarser the wheel, the faster and the cooler it cuts. And that's critical so that because the primary bevel that we're going to grind never touches the wood. So if it's coarse, it doesn't matter to the performance of the tool. And if it's coarse, as I mentioned, it'll cut faster and it'll tend to cut cooler. You can still burn with it, but less likely. Anyway, I just recently found these things. These are diamond impregnated wheels. And I don't want this to sound like a sales pitch, but you got to get it. This is absolutely incredible. Primarily because of the speed with which it cuts, and I'm about to show you that. But the other big advantage, if you've ever used a grinder before and had to change the wheels, you know what a pain it is. Trying to get that thing balanced, it's a process of starting it. It wobbles too much, shut it off, wait till it stops, reposition the wheel, and you play around with it sometimes a dozen times before you finally get it to run somewhat true. Anyway, this, you put it on and it instantly is balanced, no issues that way. So I'm just going to, go through two different blades. Now this is the Wood River blade that comes right off of the plane. Pardon the rust, but they've been hanging around a while. And to reset this to the original primary, I'm simply going to eyeball it. And when it looks to be the same, and if you're not quite sure, what you can do is just spin it by hand until it makes a few scratches. You know, it's touching right down there, so it's actually a little bit low. But as I look at that, that's a little bit steeper than 25 degrees. So I'm going to bring it down a little bit. So if it wasn't where I wanted, I'd make the adjustment, but it is. So I'm going to turn that on. Shouldn't even need to use any water. Wait till it gets up to speed. Now this grinder, by the way, is a variable speed, but I tend to keep it somewhat low. I never play with that. You want to keep the blade nice and flat on the tool rest. If you don't, and you'll in the process of moving it into the stone, you allow it to raise up, you'll end up with a bunch of different facets on here, and make it nice and neat. So my right hand, or left hand, sorry, is going to focus on keeping this tight to the tool rest, and my other hand along with this one will move it side to side. Very light pressure into the stone. I'm just going to take a quick look so you can see where we're cutting. We're a little bit lower than what it was, but that's okay. That's what I wanted. But this will not take very long. I'm going to run the camera the whole time to show you how fast it is. The other thing that I'm really impressed with, a typical grinding stone is somewhat porous. In fact, it's very porous. And I don't know, but what that contributes to all the heat ending up in the blade. This is a big hunk of steel that shares that heat or dissipates the heat. And I've gone through and I'll grind this entire blade without ever having to dip it to cool it down. Now, of course, that's partially due to the big thick tool rest, but I think it has more to do with this new grinding wheel. Now, when I'm doing this, I keep flipping back and forth. It's easiest to tell what we're doing by looking at this crest line right there. It looks fairly straight. There's nothing wrong with this edge as it is, so I don't have to go all the way through. I'm going to grind until there's just a little bit of that left. And the advantage of that is now when I go to freehand sharpen, I don't have near as much metal to remove. And the reason I like to move side to side, it's a habit from using the old wheel, the grinding wheel. But the other obvious thing is that this stone is not as wide as a blade, so you've got to cover the entire area. Very light pressure into the wheel. A lot of pressure against the actual tool rest, keeping it flat. A little bit more. My guess, and I'm only guessing, on an original grinding wheel, which I would have had a 40 grit, which is quite coarse. This I think is 120 grit. If I was to have redone this primary bevel, I would be looking at probably 12 to 15 minutes of grinding. Now that's getting close. Can you see that, Frick? Can you see what's left beyond where I'm grinding?
Yep.
I'm going to go a little bit more. Just going to give you a few little tips here. What I like to do, because you don't know the exact point where the blade is going to meet the stone, I always like to be moving laterally as I'm moving forward, as opposed to trying to come out here and meet up, because invariably you're going to end up hitting the side and grinding away your corner. So start moving laterally until the middle, the edge of the blade is in the somewhere around the middle of the stone, and then go in and engage. And then I like to disengage here. If you don't disengage for the backstroke, you end up grinding in the same spot twice as long, and that's where you tend to do two things. One is overheat, and the other is you grind more away from that one corner. You're trying to be very consistent with this. It's nice to have a nice even bevel, nice straight line down here on this crest. Now I can go a little bit more. You may not even be able to detect. I just barely back off on the pressure. I don't want to come way down here when I mention disengaging, because if you come way down here, now you're searching for that contact point again. So I just back off ever so lightly. And I stop my stroke when the blade is still, the edge of the blade is still in the middle of the stone. Again, then you're not over here trying to make that contact and running into the side of the wheel. That's barely warm. And that's a nice straight line here. You can see a little bit of the primary, the secondary bevel left. That's all I need to do, nothing more. Now, just to, this is an IBC blade. Same condition, meaning the secondary bevel has gotten quite large. This one's got a little steeper angle on it. I'll see how it meets up. But I want to show you, this being a much harder blade, how fast this thing cuts even on a hard blade. Okay, so actually, you know what? I'm not too bad. I'm touching right there. Fast, incredibly fast. Normally this would be screwed onto the base plate. I gotta get a new one. This is all chewed up. It's just sitting on there with a couple of clamps right now. We do a lot of grinding. We grind all of our half-blind chisels. We grind all of our 17-degree chisels. And this has been a real win finding this stone. And when I flipped it over, are you able to pick up on that and see where?
Yep, you hold it there. Hold it there long enough.
Now, question might be, how durable is this? We put these wheels on here, I'm gonna guess and say 4 to 6 months ago. I can't tell you how many chisels we've ground, but Jake could, and it's in a lot, and this thing still cuts amazingly fast. I would dare say it's susceptible to damage if you're in the poking something in on it too hard, but if you treat it carefully, and another nice thing is it never goes out of round. You never have to go in and dress it, so you no longer have to use your dressing tool. Pretty sure you'll never have to worry about it breaking, which is not a major concern, but is a concern with a traditional grinding wheel. Not even warm. In fact, it's lukewarm at best. And that's maybe another minute away from being finished. So you're going to have to grind if you're going to use planes and chisels. If you're trying to establish primary bevels or re-establish primary bevels with a water stone or even a ceramic stone or even a diamond hand stone, it just takes way too long. More time than I'm willing to give it. So a bench grinder is a pretty inexpensive solution to that problem. There you go, primary bevel, nice and quick.